Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Scott Luton and Greg White here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Gregory, how are we doing?
Quite well, Scott. How are you? How was your weekend?
It was wonderful. Got lots of family time in. Got lots of some gardening in. Right. Got
Right.
outside. Had a little flower contest with two of my kids. That'll be fun to see how it turns out. How
You
was
mean
your
like
weekend?
picking flower or growing flowers?
Oh no, growing flowers, and
Got it.
there's $100 on who between Gracie and Ben who can raise the most beautiful raised flower garden.
Wow. I
Got it
mean,
all
what's better than
planted.
you get at a flower show? That's pretty good. Having a good year, aren't you?
Hey, we don't
Um,
mess around. What'd you do?
so I celebrated National Supply Chain Day. I feel like Scott, there ought to be a determination that we celebrate it on Friday or Monday when it's on the weekend. But as this is the very first time that National Supply Chain Day has been on the weekend, I understand that the administration has not stepped in to define the policy,
Right.
but I feel like we should appeal to them to do so.
I completely agree. Completely agree. And a big shout out, folks. We all celebrate over the weekend to Mary Kate Love, who is the official founder. A lot of folks will claim this, that, and the other, but Greg and I were with Mary Kate Love when she filed all the necessary stuff back in 2020, Greg.
I think it was, yeah, the U.S. I mean, officially filed with the U.S. government. It is
That's right.
officially National Supply Chain Day.
And I wish there was a gentleman on our comments that said every day is supply chain day, and we subscribe to that too. But having one day out of the year, we really celebrate the workforce and all the things that make the supply chain ecosystem happen here in the states and really globally. Uh, that's good stuff. All
Yeah,
right, so
and it's a good thing it was on a Saturday too, because we can't have people going to the beach and drinking beer all day if a National Supply Chain Day is during the week, right?
right, that is right. I
It'd be
love how you
hilarious if
think.
the whole supply chain took that day off, wouldn't
All
it?
right. I want to, so folks, today, if you're tuned in, as you may know, it's the Supply Chain Buzz, a live show that comes at you every Monday at 12 noon Eastern Time. As always, Greg and I, we're going to be discussing a variety of news and developments, really across global business, but a ton of supply chain baked in, as y'all know. And we want to hear from you. So give us your take in the comments. We see some folks already weighing in. We're going to recognize a few of those folks. And Greg, if folks are listening to the podcast replay, what ought they might do?
Ought they might do.
That's probably poor English.
That was like I think there was an extra word in there, but I can't figure out which one. They might, well, what they ought to do, they ought to go to YouTube because
Ah,
there you get to also watch us. And this is a thing. Scott and I, folks, if you haven't noticed this, probably many of you have, but it's become quite the thing that we've been doing now for 4 years for people to allow you to watch them do what is effectively a podcast. Now we do it live. Some do it live, some don't. And almost nobody involves their audience the way Scott Luton does.
ah,
Um, but
thank you for that,
but
Greg.
it's become quite the thing on YouTube. I'd have to double check the numbers with Catherine, our beloved and very bold producer, who told us something like 70% of podcasts are consumed on YouTube. And based on the numbers that we're getting, what did we have? Like 169,000 views in a month or something like that, or a week? I don't
Well,
remember.
so I think you're right, man. You got a mind for the number. I think as a channel, but what I've seen here recently, as you know, we continue to crack the code and reach more folks, is I looked at I think 6 of our most popular episodes in the last 30 days or so. And Greg, we were averaging 7,000 views on each of those shows. And that still might be conservative too. So, Greg, to your point, come check us out on YouTube, right?
Oh Lord, the world has found us, so now we have to act like upright citizens, which you always
Well,
do.
that's
So
right.
you're good. We
Upstanding.
might have to cancel a few of our own old episodes.
Nah.
So Scott,
Nah. But hey, if you're listening to the audio podcast replay of today's Supply Chain Buzz, come check us out. Live show. We'd love to incorporate you into the conversation, just like we're about to do. All right. So, Greg, before I get into some of the program
mhm,
notes, to your point, let's say hello to a few folks that are tuned in from Syad. I wonder where he is tuned in from. Let us know where you're tuned in from. We love to connect those dots there. NEO, Dr. Actually, I should say Dr. Velasco. Say that right, Greg?
Yeah, sounds right.
From Boston. Hey, if you're an NBA fan, your Celtics, just put it on our Atlanta Hawks, and Celtics are going to be a tough team to beat in the NBA championships, ain't they, Greg?
Sure.
Okay.
I have to confess, not much of an NBA.
Our dear friend Josh Goody tuned in from the West Coast, from Seattle, of course. He's our Seattle correspondent. He says he's recovering from an 80-degree weekend. Greg, is that
Wow.
uncommon out there?
Yeah, this time of year definitely is. It happens occasionally. Well, the question is, Josh, did the sun come out, and did you get to see how beautifully green the entire area is? Whenever
That's a
the
good
sun is
question.
out there, which seems to be rare, it is just a beautiful scene.
Josh, we got to have pictures. We got to have pictures, and we're going to share them on the buzz. So give us pictures of the scene out there, especially on the pretty days. Michael, good morning from Southern California. Michael, great to see you here. Angela from North Kakalaki. Angela, I hope this finds you well. I think of barbecue, Greg. When I think of North Carolina, my mind goes straight to barbecue. You ever had good barbecue in North Carolina?
No. East
No?
side, I don't like the mustard kind, and I don't like the kind of oily kind. And,
Okay.
there's this whole big dispute in North Carolina from east to west. I can't remember which is which, but and it's not that it's bad. It just
Right.
doesn't fit my taste. I'm from the Midwest. I'm used to not having sauce. Now we are allowed to have sauce, but you got your hand slapped if you wanted sauce when I was a kid. That's a rub. You don't need sauce.
So Angela, weigh in if you're
Yeah.
a fellow barbecue
Yeah, let us know
connoisseur.
which way it goes. What's the type on the east and what's the type on the west?
That's right. Muhammad is tuning in from Egypt, land of vegetables and fruits. I love that picture you're painting, Muhammad. And let us know where in Egypt, what city that you're in.
My
Uh,
youngest daughter was just in Egypt
oh,
for
that's
spring
right.
break.
I think Vicki was telling me about all of her travels, all the countries
Yeah,
she's been.
went to Egypt and Turkey for spring break because she's going to school in Switzerland this
Man.
summer.
Oguntayo, great to see you here via LinkedIn from Toronto. And I love those. You are highly credentialed, my friend. Love to know what you're up to up there in Toronto. Francisco says in Brazil, it's also Supply Chain Day.
There we
So,
go.
Francisco, let us know if it's a true holiday or if you're referring to how it's Supply Chain Day every day, and let us know where in Brazil you're tuned in
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, what city? Right.
Our good friend Jose Montoya, who
There
does
we go.
great work. He's based out there in California, but hosts an international show, a global show with co-hosts around the world. Great to see you, Jose.
Never have to ask him what the weather is because it's always the same, except in June when it's foggy till noon from the marine inversion and then it clears off.
Jose, fill us in. Fill us in, man.
Meteorologist in San Diego has got to be the easiest job on the planet.
Uh,
73 and sunny.
Fana, Fana is tuned in. What up? What up? He says from South Africa, headed your way in June. Fana, so great to have you here. Melanie tuned in from New Hampshire. Let's see here. Muhammad is Ismaila close. That's the city in Egypt. He
Okay.
is in.
I'm not that familiar, so.
Well, great to have you
We'll
tuned
ask
in.
Ashlyn. She can tell us.
Yeah, that's right.
She said everybody was super friendly there. They
Really,
would walk down the street and say, welcome.
man.
Right.
Well, I want to get out there soon. And then finally, Bruce Taylor, who's a little bit closer to us, coming in, tuning from Savannah. What a gorgeous city in Savannah.
Just over my
GA.
shoulder over here.
That's right. We got to get that index. I said finally, Tsquared coming in right under the gun. Good May Day, folks. He says, bring on that nourishment and t-shirt isms on this SCN Monday. Great to see you, Tsquared. All right. So, Greg, we got a ton of good stuff to get into. Let me pull up our first graphic because before we do, we want to share a few learning opportunities for folks out there, right? So if you enjoy what we do here on the Buzz, you're going to love our webinars and some other live streams. So coming up tomorrow, Greg, we were talking about this pre-show.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to dive deep into the domestic freight market, right? As we covered U.S. Bank's Freight Payment Index for first quarter 2023. So you see there, if you're viewing us, you got Bobby Holland, who's going to bring really the data side, right? He's with US Bank. He compiles the reports. But then we love marrying up his perspective, Greg, with Michelle Moore, who leads supply chain with GAF, right? So she's out, and her and her team are out in the markets, and we're going to get her
using this thing and
that's
find out
right.
what they can find out.
Yes, and we're going to see what she agrees with and what she's seeing, what she maybe disagrees with as well. So join us tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time as we talk freight. Greg, your thoughts here?
I love the new format. I mean, the way that we're doing it now really lets you explore how Michelle and her team are using it, what they're seeing on the ground. We get through hey, why is the data valid for those that are new watching the show really quick, and get into why the data is what it is, which Bobby can help us with a lot, and then what to do with and about that.
That's right. That is right. So join us tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time. It's a quarterly show we have, and I tell you, it creeps up on us each time. Time's just flying past, right?
Yeah, like it happens every 3 months.
It's like that old saying that gets me sentimental sometimes. The days are long, but the years are short. If you're a parent, you can relate, right? All right, Francisco, to close that loop there. He's in Sao Paulo, and it's the Labor Day holiday there in Brazil. But that's the supply chain day, as he calls it. I agree with you, Francisco.
I like that.
Angela. Angela's weighing in the barbecue. She says Eastern style versus Kentucky style.
Said oil, it's vinegar based, right?
Yes. Eastern is vinegar based, while Kentucky or the Western style is more sweet and tomato flavored. Hey, sign me up for all of it, Angela. Sign me up for all of it. And finally, we're talking weather in Seattle. Josh says summer here is about 2.5 months of combined sunshine, but he thought the apocalypse had come when the temperature popped 100 for a week straight last year. Well, as long there's no zombies, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, back to programming. So again, join us tomorrow, folks. And then, so over the weekend, we dropped the latest edition of With That Said, and this is one of my recent favorites. We dove into a couple things near and dear to our heart. Number one, Donna, who celebrated 50 years in the workforce, including a couple decades at CNN. We shared some of her good stuff. And then we also tackled some of our favorite episodes related to our supply chain leadership across Africa series that we do with Jenny Froome and our friends there. So, Greg, did you get a chance to dive into the latest edition?
No, I kind of skimmed the surface of it.
Okay. Well, so
I didn't belly flop, so that's good.
And we're trying, so Donna, well, big shout out to Catherine, the man behind the scenes, helping make things happen. And Chantel, Donna is one of our executive producers here, right? Really leveraging all that experience in the broadcast industry. And she celebrated 50 years in the workforce this week, and she did a great write-up last week of her critical lessons learned. And we're trying to get her on a show too, aren't we, Greg?
Yeah.
Get her to share direct, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Hopefully this Wednesday with the great Mike Griswold from Gartner.
Fingers crossed.
Hey, I have a question. How can people sign up for that?
I love that question, Greg. It's as simple as clicking on this link that we just dropped in the chat. And if y'all are familiar with LinkedIn newsletters, there's a little subscribe button up at the top. One click and you get it, whether you like it or not, every week.
Every Saturday.
Both, and as I understand it, both to your LinkedIn profile, but also it hits your email in case that's where you prefer to get your newsletters. So y'all check that out. All right. So Greg, one other quick thing we put in the newsletter. So my dear friend, Chuck Baker, fellow veteran, although he spent, I think 20 with the Army. I've known him for probably 15 years. He is very passionate about spreading awareness for business and leadership and supply chain. And he's been doing a lot of that work in middle school and high schools in South Carolina, Greg, with something that they call the cell phone game. And he is ready to expand it and help other folks get into their schools and talk supply chain. So if you're interested in that, and he's one heck of a guy, salt of the earth. If you're interested, reach out to our team here and we'll make that connection with Chuck. I can personally vouch for his great work as a practitioner. He spent a lot of time in the tire industry, I believe, Greg. But anyway, Chuck Baker is a good person. Greg, you and I have done a little bit of that before too.
Yeah, that was fun. We did that. You set that up, and I think I think somebody from South Carolina adopted it also, and they did it. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they did it for a while. But it was a great program. Honestly, I think those of us who are practitioners think of this thing as so complex
Mm.
as to be impossible to explain. But when you have to explain it to people with no context, not only of supply chain but business,
Yep.
It really forces you to think about what's important about what we do, which is mostly getting stuff to another place for the person who wants it. Right?
So true. That's right.
I mean, it really is as simple as that. And didn't we discover a young man who discovered that his dad was in supply chain by us explaining that
Yep.
that was that school in East Cobb. I cannot remember the kid's name, but I remember his face. He was a fireball, right?
We know
we need more of that kid.
you're so right. And the man, to see these light bulbs go off, and folks, these kids, they don't need 3 hours of explaining. They get it like that, to Greg's point, and they had eureka moments, and they're connecting the dots. I mean, it's amazing. You'll feel a lot better if you get in your schools and talk supply chain, or really just engage students and share anything.
Yeah.
You'll see what we're talking about. We'll feel really good about the future.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So let's get into, speaking of supply chain, we got 3 or 4 stories here today. And our dear friend Mark, moving stuff to where it needs to be. Sounds simple. Greg always makes things sound simple and melodic.
Yeah, 1,100 steps in there, but to explain what it is, you don't need to know all that.
That's right. That is right. All right. So we're going to dive, Greg, into our first story here today. So I'm going to get into an update on the ongoing Bed Bath & Beyond story, saga, whatever you call it. So as reported here by CNBC, the retailer officially declared bankruptcy on Sunday, April 23rd. We all knew it was coming. Hundreds of Bed Bath & Beyond stores are expected to be closing across the country, as pointed out here in the article, just like Kmart and Sears did in recent years. And that how it created some vacant footprint and stores and space, offering that valuable real estate for other retailers that actually are growing and need more space. Greg, we're talking 500 locations if you include the Bye Bye Baby footprint into the overall number. 500 stores are going to be open. Now, demand for retail space is high, as many folks here in our audience knows, for a variety of reasons. A lot of retailers are flush with cash due to all that spending we all did during the pandemic. Physical stores are also serving as fulfillment centers, which we've touched on thousands and thousands of times. And hybrid work's popularity. I got to admit, I didn't think about this one. With hybrid work and how popular that is now, folks aren't going to stores, first thing in the morning and when they get off at 5:30. They're in stores really all the time. So, Greg, would love to get your thoughts here on what we're seeing with this Bed Bath & Beyond story and the opportunities that exist.
Yeah, well, one, it took unbelievably inept management to destroy this company, and even then it took them years to do so. They didn't realize that they had a business that was being disintermediated by e-commerce, and they never got into e-commerce with any level of seriousness. And it just, that is what killed the company. And then they did stupid things like announce their problems to their vendors and then proceed to lose the trust of those vendors in a multitude of ways over a number of years. They changed management a couple different times, and no one ever really saw what the core problem was, which was we should close all these stores or many of these stores, and we should be an e-commerce business, right? Kind of like Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble, almost 30 years ago, should have looked at Amazon and go, wow, they're making a pile. Maybe we should do that.
Right.
Sorry, Mr. Barnes. I did get a company he was trying to start after that. Anyway, this is an incredible opportunity. I think it's inopportune timing, however, because if you look at what many of the pundits are saying, they're expecting a commercial real estate collapse in any time this year, probably in the second half, third or fourth quarter. And retail is not above that. They're concerned about commercial buildings, business high rises. They're concerned about strip malls, and if there are any actual real malls, whatever you call it, just malls. Obviously has been concern there for over a decade. So I don't know what it means for that. It will probably mean that someone will get a bargain by subletting from whoever winds up owning all this stuff, or the liquidator or whomever.
Yeah.
I am encouraged that Bed Bath & Beyond filed Chapter 11. I'm not certain, with all of the capital and overhead that they've got, that they won't wind up shutting down completely. I don't know. It's tough because they have incredibly terrible management, and I feel at once sorry for, and like hopefully they've learned a great lesson for all these apes, the hodlers, right, that tried to prop this up during COVID, like they did AMC and whatever the gaming company, both of which.
Oh, GameStop,
right? Another company that should have gone completely online a decade ago. But those people will have lost all their money by now because the stock is absolutely worthless at this point. So, but these are the lessons that we need from time to time, and it is. I think it's comforting in this fact, Scott. Even though this has happened and this will happen more, there are probably 15 other retailers teetering on the edge. It took unbelievably inept management over the series of almost half a decade to destroy this company. So that should tell you, right, how much leeway you have as an operating manager of a retail enterprise, even with the tight margins that retail has, how much you can mess around before you find out.
Put politely.
Yeah. So, there's usually, and there has been frequently, hope there, and there obviously is for other enterprises here, but Best Buy was at one time bankrupt, and they came out of it just unbelievably transformed and became the source for electronics. And then they got hammered by the e-commerce space, and they adapted to that rapidly.
Right.
So if you have competent management, you can get through these things. Situations don't kill companies. Management kills companies.
Excellent. I appreciate your perspective there. Two quick thoughts on the Best Buy thing. I'm not sure when the timing of this, but from what I've seen every time in the Best Buy, the line for Geek Squad is out the door. So when they picked that up and included that as part of the value prop, the drive foot traffic, I can only imagine what that did. And then secondly, going back to what you said on the front end of your commentary there, supplier trust. Man, if you're not working to invest in, increase, retain, build trust with your suppliers as you try to get through these tough times, you're missing out and you're creating more risk. So a lot of good stuff there, Greg White. All right. And Josh says, I'm part of that group for GameStop. Apes strong together, Greg, to the moon. Okay. And Jose.
Hey, Josh, I just hope it was just only a tiny fraction of your portfolio.
That's right. Jose, hey, give old Mark a ring. We're certainly happy to talk with him. And great to have you here today, as always, Jose. Okay, so Greg, for the sake of time, we're going to dive into this next story here. And this is an interesting one on a variety of levels. So one company probably not buying former Bed Bath & Beyond stores, but who knows? Well, that would be Amazon. So as reported here by one of the best of business, Supply Chain Dive, Amazon is slowing its capital investment spend in 2023. Not stopping it, just slowing it, folks. As a company, the Big A looks to optimize its recently overhauled fulfillment operations. So here, this is interesting. Great opportunity we have here. So Greg, some of our listeners, but most of them probably do, but some of our listeners may not know that you've worked closely with Amazon in some of your previous leadership roles. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah. So to give some context, I ran a company owned by another company that provided an application to the teams that either refitted distribution centers and fulfillment centers, to simplify the terminology because I've got like 5 terms for it, for Amazon, when they were either being built or being refitted. So I have some insight here, and they have ebbed and flowed in terms of how much they've done over the years. But Scott, it seems like we had this discussion a year or so ago that they were going to slow down, and even then they built like 200 facilities.
Good point.
So I think slowing is relative when you talk about Amazon, but they obviously have recognized that people are going into stores more, and that they don't need the fulfillment space. What they have are called delivery stations that might be a good fit for some of these locations. It's been more typical for Amazon to build or to embed those into an industrial real estate complex. But if retail real estate space becomes more affordable, just imagine the leverage that Amazon could put on a space like that by making it effectively a store. They have a completely no-touch store system where basically you go through this matrix of cameras, and you tap your card on the way in. They take, they identify what you've taken from the shelf, and you just walk out with it, and you've paid.
Man, so, it's just
they've had that for probably 6 or 7 years, and I saw a YouTube video about it. It's become so much more refined, obviously, in that time.
Very interesting simplicity there. The simplicity that you just paint that picture. That is, we can't keep everything simple, but we can keep a lot of these things simple. And,
and I'm not sure that Amazon would do that, but it would be an interesting, transition for them, because they know what the hot products are in kind of a circular service area around their delivery stations. And that's why they keep those products there.
Yep.
So imagine if, instead of them shipping it to you, you could go pick it up, and maybe they give you a better price for it that way. Yep. Right.
Yeah.
Who knows? And it would be a logical transition, because I think we are going back to more in-store experiences.
Yes. Oh, no doubt. Completely agree with you. And I sure am thankful. As I shared last week, I think I'll never take for granted the ability to get out and shop or break bread or travel or whatever else with friends old and new. But speaking of, so as a Amazon customer, which I'm sure you are as well, we've talked about this, I'm also a new Costco customer. Now, Vicki White is out there listening. If Vicki White, Greg, Vicki could be an onboarding consultant. I've met few people that know all the ins and outs like Vicki does about Costco, but it's really interesting because as we've pushed some of our spend to Costco, we've really enjoyed that, saved a ton of money. I think for the most part, we're still doing the analysis. But Amazon, as I have stopped purchasing some of those things, right, and try to cut down on boxes and for a variety of reasons, it's interesting to see Amazon's response as it sends me, hey, have you forgotten about this and forgotten about that? Man, it really just reemphasizes to me for the millionth time, man, how well they know. They know their consumers, they know their preferences. And if you doubt that for a second, stop buying a few items that you normally do with Amazon and just observe. Greg, it's remarkable, really.
It really is. I mean, to me, it seemed like such common sense, like even just the buy now button, which they patented,
right,
and basically took away from anyone else to have the ability to have a one-click buy. I mean, it's one of those, why didn't I think of that things. They have, I don't know, tens, hundreds of thousands of people. They are constantly working on innovation, right? Their core values are to break everything all the time, right? And also be right a lot. That's a key one, right?
I like that one, Greg.
Lots of companies disrupt themselves a lot, but they don't remember to be right when they do it. They're a little bit sloppy about it. Amazon, what is their superpower is that ability, really commitment to do it. And they're blessed, regardless of what you think about Jeff Bezos personally.
Yep.
And if you have any questions, ask his ex-wife. But
Oh, boy.
they are blessed when he was CEO with a leader who was incredibly finance focused. He put the core metrics that investors and good practitioners of business
Yep.
require. He put those practices, those financial practices in place. He used the metrics and extended those metrics. What cash flow ought to be, working capital, et cetera, right? Profit margins, all that sort of thing. He put those into place, and even while they were growing at an incredibly rapid pace, he insisted on those things. That doesn't mean they didn't invest in innovation. As you know, they weren't profitable for almost 20 years.
Right.
But they still had a lot of the core metrics in place so that when they reached a certain level of volume, they were super efficient. And that super efficiency is what has allowed them to accumulate the billions and tens, almost 100 billion in cash that allows them to do anything.
Yes. That's great. Man, that's like you just gave us like an MBA lesson in 2 minutes there, Greg. I would just add, Greg and I sat down with one of the Big A's big competitors that's making some gains. And that's Walmart. And we sat down with Jennifer McKeon. We've mentioned it here a couple of times. We published it last week. If we can drop that link in the chat, it's cool to see Walmart pick up some of this, make the gains it's been making here in recent months and last year or two. All right.
Still, though, the largest company in the entire world, Walmart. But isn't it funny how people have shifted to kind of pulling for Walmart
right
against Amazon, right?
Right.
Like they're the underdog, ever
that's
were
right.
or ever will be. I mean, that is also an enormously efficiently operated organization.
Yes, that's right. I was
And
just
it
saying
ain't the Walmart it used to be.
No.
I used intentionally, right? It's not just people coming down from the hills to buy sacks of sugar to make their shine. It is that still in some places, but also some of these stores are in incredibly posh areas.
Right.
Now. I mean,
that's right.
You see some of these Walmarts with parking lots full of Mercedes.
Man. Well, I was in Walmart over the weekend.
My house, but
I was about to say, unfortunately, I can't add to its Mercedes count in the parking lot yet. So, but anyway, hey, we just dropped the link to the audio version of that interview. It's a quick, easy listen. Y'all check that out. Let's see here. Rami, great to see you here. Let us know where you're tuned in from there via LinkedIn. And Josh says, back to Amazon. Josh says Amazon paid 3x the market valuation for the company that pioneered that deals of the day. Greg, did you know that?
Yeah, they aren't afraid to pay. They aren't afraid to pay a premium because companies like that acquire companies at a high premium, they know already where the opportunities are to squeeze more out of that company. And if you doubt that, if you'd like to see that dramatized, watch Succession sometime.
Yes, that's right? Folks.
No
quick aside. Check out Succession, or you are missing out. It's one of the best shows on TV.
Spoilers. I'm 2 episodes behind, Scott. So be careful.
I ain't gonna say a word. In fact, I missed last night because Amanda was she was at a concert with our daughters, which we'll touch on that later on, maybe. Okay, so let's see. We're moving into the next story, Greg.
Let's do that.
Now, this is a talk about on a related note. This is a really interesting report here. So I want to talk about our friends at the Wall Street Journal, what they are reporting on here, because investors are still pouring lots of money into logistics, tech, startups, ventures, you name it. And Greg, 3 hot areas that are attracting investments. Again, should be no surprise, for anyone in our audience, because these are things we've been talking about. I don't know, it feels like 3 decades. 3 of them, though: supply chain visibility and management, duh; robotics, duh; and 3D printing. Now, that's kind of an interesting one, right? Because we've been talking about 3D printing as well feels like since the gold rush of 49. But don't roll your eyes when you hear 3D printing, because I believe it's poised to make perhaps its biggest impact yet. In fact, in this article, 3D printing applications that make computer chip manufacturing easier more reliable is mentioned. Now that, given wherever, everything that chips are going into these days, that would be a coup. It'd be a home run, a Hank Aaron home run. Greg, I'm dying to know you as an investor, so you see that side as a supply chain practitioner, just being the Greg White that I know and love. Your thoughts here on the investment trends in this space?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I don't roll my eyes at 3D printing. Where I roll my eyes is at supply chain visibility. It means nothing anymore. Absolutely nothing. I mean, some of these companies they're just reporting houses, and I think that aspect of the industry, we either need to find a new name or description for it or something, because companies that just provide you visibility to your supply chain, that's not new. It's not helpful. There are huge players in the market already who do that. And supply chain visibility usually only means, at least this has been my experience in evaluating hundreds of companies over the last few years, it usually only means your goods in motion. Like, is it on a truck? Is it on a boat? Is it on a plane? Right? Is it at the bottom of the sea? Right? Is it on the dock? Did it get lost? Right? That kind of thing. So, one, we need supply chain visibility throughout the supply chain. We need to start looking in enterprise to look at where our, let's say, raw materials providers are, or manufacturers are, or even interim warehouse facilities. And when I think of visibility, I think like we talk to chief supply chain officers all the time, Scott, and I think about what they're really concerned about is not just, or even necessarily, how are my goods in motion? What's the state of them, but also, what is the state of my supply chain? Everyone knows their supply chain is fragile, but they don't know where. So they know that the next black swan event or disruption or weather happening or geopolitical conflict is going to impact their supply chain. They don't know where, and they don't know to what measure. And that's really, really important. And that is still completely a blind spot for virtually every chief supply chain officer out there, because so many solutions are segmented into various parts of the supply chain. And mostly we focus on logistics in motion.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of opportunities. 3D printing is one. I think when you think about where investment is going, what we're looking for is something that is breakthrough, something that is truly breakthrough. When you're in investment, you get presented Me Too's or also Rans all the time because the founders are new to the business or naive, or sometimes they're practitioners new to technology. They don't know what it takes. I'm not pointing at anybody here, but it happens frequently when people who are practitioners in an industry and not technologists in an industry come into the business. They have a very narrow perspective. So I think, though, that this recent kind of economic upheaval with the banks has sort of filtered out the mediocre to poorly conceived companies, and we're starting to see more and more quality come to the top. But yeah, I think it's a great time to be investing in supply chain logistics, whatever you want to call it, the commerce ecosystem, as I call it, where you're starting to connect enterprises and more than just tell them their supply chain is up, but tell them what they can do to fix it. Right?
Yes. And Greg said fouled up, in case y'all didn't hear that. Fouled up.
Is my mic cut out? Thank God for that 5-second delay.
I love that. I love hearing since you are an investor and you've been there and done that, kind of on both sides of the table. I guess I'll put it more simply.
All three sides of the table.
All three sides. That's right.
Service provider, a practitioner, and an investor. And having all three of those perspectives is frankly a blessing and a curse.
I think I'll tell you, it's a blessing to be collaborating and partnering with you here at Supply Chain Now, because we benefit from it all the time. So Greg, I love that you are able to share with our global audience here some of what maybe, they don't always get from you here. And that's the investor side and what you've seen and do in that space.
Yeah, I would say if you're starting a technology company now, don't call it supply chain visibility.
That's golden
Call it
advice.
call it the problem that it solves, right? Because I think what we need more is more prescriptive analytics, right? And not visibility analytics. Don't just tell me that the supply chain is messed up. Tell me where, why, and how to fix it.
Love it. All right. Greg, you know what? We're gonna have to crank back up on Tequila Sunrise because that's what reminds me of some of those conversations you had there that were so popular and well received. But we'll save that for another
That's so
day.
much work, Scott.
I know. We're gonna make it easier. But folks, that reminds me, kidding aside, if you love hearing from Greg on some of those investment stories, some of those startup stories,
Mm.
and a lot more, all innovation, technology, you can still find all the episodes Tequila Sunrise wherever you get your podcast from. Okay.
Some of that stuff is still really relevant. I mean,
Oh yeah.
some of the guidance was how to pitch your company, the some relation to what the environment is like, what investors are looking for.
Yep.
They know that you don't know that they know that you should not try to trick them because they know when you're trying to trick them, or give them a snow job or whatever.
Right.
And all kinds of that is really true, and that comes from being on both sides of that investment table too, having pitched to investors and being now constantly pitched.
Yep. I
50
bet.
times a day on LinkedIn, and also reviewing pitch materials as well.
Yep. All right. So go back on 3D printing. I'm gonna share Josh's
Yeah,
comment.
man.
He says there was a large push. This is Josh again for 3D printers for home use during COVID. Home-based businesses, even labs, are using it for small gadgets. Robotics also made a huge push into biotech during COVID, and people are happily looking around and realizing they can reorganize operations. Yes, not only can they, but they must, given what we're seeing really across the workforce. The other
So
thing
can we
about
talk about that real quick?
yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry, finish your thoughts, Scott. Please.
Well, the other cool thing about 3D printing that we shared during the height of the pandemic, the Veterans Administration, and I want to be kind here as a veteran. There's
Right.
lots of concerns about the Veterans Administration. I think that's pretty fair, but they were really on the forefront of putting innovation into practice with using 3D printing in its operational footprint and printing masks that were needed for their facilities. Hey, that's a great win. But
Yeah.
Greg, you were about to talk about, I think, robotics, workforce, what have you.
Well, and 3D printing. I mean, I think there are some amazing applications that should give us an idea. For one example is printing prosthetics. So if you can get a CAD drawing of a prosthetic, you can print it right in the office, right?
Yep.
Rather than have to have it made and molded, and so many of them are manually shaped and that sort of thing. And the other is, and this is near and dear to my heart, for vintage cars.
Yeah.
They're now printing the parts rather than trying to find them, because if you go far enough back, you can't find the oil pump for a Model A or a Model T.
Right. Right.
Actually, you probably can for some of those cars, but for others, it becomes exceedingly difficult to do. So they're printing those kind of things, and just think about those things that are hard to get.
Yep.
Or maybe you only need one off. And you would rather have it printed than wait or search the entire planet to try and find it in a junkyard.
Yes. It's really interesting about spare parts. We just knocked out a great live stream last week or so about spare parts and modern approaches. Y'all check that out. But to your point, Greg, and you are, of course, a true auto enthusiast. I'm a casual observer. I know nothing about cars, but we all have repaired our vehicles, and we all know the spare part shortages that have added to waiting times and lead times of getting your cars fixed. And those are really widespread models that everyone has. To Greg's point, going back to a classic car where there might be just a couple thousand on the highways and byways, man, you might be searching junkyards near and far, dealer networks forever to find certain parts. So to your point, to have a 3D printer that you can load in some blueprints from the days gone by and have it spit out what you need, man, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And there are all kinds of other applications that make sense for
Yes.
that application, right? So
I think going back to and I am not an engineer, and I'm certainly not a computer chip engineer. Y'all check out this. We dropped a link to this story that started this whole conversation. Y'all check that out because a big chunk of that is talking about 3D printing's application in the semiconductor industry. In fact, Intel has made a sizable investment in a startup. So y'all check that out.
I can't
All right.
wait till robots are using AI to run 3D printing
Right.
machines to make stuff, right? And we just
Maybe
sit around and wait for Amazon or Walmart or Shopify to deliver it.
Yeah, maybe we'll get that website that was promised by our federal government for so long ago. You know, that's part of the Supply
Gosh, I've
Chain
totally
Act.
forgotten about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
my hunch is that hasn't been stood up yet, but I'll save that for another time.
Mhm.
Okay, I want
Okay.
to as we wrap here today on the buzz, and thanks for all the. I know we couldn't get everybody's comments here today. I want to give a quick shout out to Kelvin, tuned in from Zambia via LinkedIn. Great to see you, Kelvin. I want to talk about the railroad industry. So the railroad industry has been in the news, Greg, for a variety of reasons. Of course, a lot of it hasn't been good stuff. But I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at maybe railroads' biggest players globally. Now, so for a little context there, Greg, a couple facts that our audience should know, may already know, I don't know. Of course, here in the U.S., the railroad industry focuses more on freight, not passengers, as opposed to the rest of the world where passenger travel is big. And we're not gonna touch on Amtrak here today. Of course, Amtrak is kind of a bit of a unique player. The railroad industry is growing. So globally, it was valued at $660 million in 2018, Greg.
Billion?
Yeah, million. No, I'm sorry, billion. My bad, billion. And it's expected. Good catch. Kind of a big difference there. It's expected to reach 890 billion by 2025. How about that? So, thanks to our friends at BizVibe, what we did is we pulled together the largest railroad companies in the world by revenue, not market cap. Market cap look a lot different. Y'all can check that out, but by revenue. So, Greg, how would you pronounce the top one there? It's based in Germany.
Deutsche Bahn.
Deutsche Bahn.
German railroad is what that means.
That's right. And if I'm not mistaken, the Federal Republic of Germany is the largest shareholder. I think the only one in that business. So a little context there. It's the number one railroad company in the world by revenue. Indian Railways, East Japan Railway Company is number 3. Union Pacific, finally, a U.S. Railroad is ranked. Of course, that's based in, you know where, Greg? Oh, Union Pacific?
I don't know where it's based. No.
Nebraska.
Really?
I was kind of surprised with that. Yeah, Nebraska. So that's number 4. Central Japan Railway Company is number 5. CSX Transportation, based in Jacksonville, if I'm not mistaken, comes number 6. Norfolk Southern Railway, based here in Atlanta,
Neither north. Well, I guess technically southern. Right?
Yes.
Although if you ask somebody from South Georgia if Atlanta's in the South, they would say no.
Right. Good point. Good point. And then to round out the list, Canadian National Railway, number 7, Canadian Pacific Railway, number 9, and MTR. It's MTR, Mass Transit Railway, serving Hong Kong. So that comes in number 10. So, Greg.
In revenue. That's in revenue.
Yeah, in revenue, not market cap, but in revenue.
Look at the German railway. I mean, they're 40% higher than, no, not 40%. Good God, they're like 67% higher than the next largest company.
Well,
that's crazy.
And to your point there, that's why it's kind of tough to really stack these up in like a perfect oranges or apples, oranges and oranges comparison, right? Yeah. Because railroading, the approach kind of varies a little bit. Well, a lot from region to region, but even from country to country, But I thought that it's really fascinating to kind of put this into perspective. Because I don't know about you, I've never conducted or engineered a train, Greg, and of course, smart railroading has been a fascinating thing to watch in recent years, and of course, the growth and the reliance that global supply chain has on railroading. But Greg, any other thoughts, observations? Have you ever engineered a train down the tracks?
I have not, but my uncle worked for Santa Fe. way back when I was a kid, and so I got to go on a caboose when they still had cabooses. I didn't get to do it while it was rolling. But I am just absolutely obsessed with trains. I'm one of the few people on the planet who, when you get stopped at a railroad crossing, doesn't curse that they're going to be late somewhere. I'm like counting cars, and
Right.
I had a buddy in college. My college roommate could identify every engine. That's a
Really?
GM electric. That's a GM diesel. And he'd be like, and it's an X5037B. You can tell it's a B because it's got two smokestacks in the front and one in the back, or something like, I don't know.
Man.
But
That,
which I wish I had that skill. But
yes.
it is a fascinating means of transport.
Yes, it is.
It's different. I mean, and I don't think people in Europe understand why we don't use trains more here in the States, but it's because we fit couple hundred million more people in a space that is bigger than the entire continent of Europe, right?
Yep. Yep.
Closer to Australia. So, we have so many cities spread around, is why we use it for, for goods transport, right? Rather than people transport. But I think we're coming around to it. If you drive in Atlanta much,
Right.
right?
That's so true.
A train is starting to make more and more sense. It's just that the cities are so vastly separated here, and of course, here we're in the Piedmont of the Appalachian Mountains. So I just would hate to see someone try to even build rail between here and, say,
oh gosh,
Knoxville, right, or something like that. I mean, I don't know how you do it.
Me neither. But you're talking about the train conductor and all that stuff. I always think, whenever I think of the word conductor and I picture something in my mind, my buddy Chuck, who I went to school with, Chuck, if you're listening, big old shout out to you. He told me one time, so where we stayed, where one of our apartments was, we had active rail lines just outside the back window. And Chuck said he was studying one day. It has windows open. It was a nice fall day, maybe in South Carolina. And he saw the train come real slow, and the conductor was out the window. So Chuck waves at him, nice southerly thing to do. And the guy responds with the finger. So he was having a rough day, maybe. But that visual always comes to my mind.
Maybe because they were being forced to go slow. You just never know, right?
You never know. You never know. Hey,
So,
Moms is here today.
Yeah, I saw that. She sounded off about her uncle.
Yes. Leah Luton says, my uncle was a train engineer way back. We're going to have to get some stories there, Mom. You're holding out on us. Out on us.
It was my uncle who worked for Santa Fe, and it was fun. We would do this like 5 times a summer. We would go visit my aunt, and she would drive him to work, and we'd go every time he went to work, which was like 4:00 in the morning at the latest. But then you'd get to stand around the train yard and see it all happen, and it is just fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
It really is. It really is. All right. So, Greg, man, we've had a wide-ranging show here today. Folks, we want to encourage you once again to come check out our live stream tomorrow, all about the freight market across from coast to coast here in the States. Bobby Holland with U.S. Bank, Michelle Moore with GAF. That kicks off at 12 noon Eastern time.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, as we wrap here today, so you shared a lot of great perspective and expertise, especially for founders, startup, of course, for supply chain practitioners. But if there's one thing that you want to encourage people to take home, put into action, write in their diaries, if that's still a thing, what would that one thing be, Greg?
Yeah, it would be to look up. That would be, I mean, if you're reading the news or you're following pundits or whatever, there's all kinds of things happening. There's all kinds of current and potential struggles out there with the economy, with, mostly the economy right now. I mean, some of these things have kind of settled in, even the geopolitical disruptions, which is what we have to call wars now. Things like that have kind of settled in, and that's a travesty, but it is not, at least right now, a major disruption to most of the world. But there are lots of things there that are pending right? The consumer sentiment is way down. Inflation is slowing, which doesn't mean it's low. It just means it's not 11% anymore, at least in the States. There's talk of recession all over the world, and I really feel for Japan, who it feels like has been in recession for almost 30 years now. But my suggestion is look up. Through all this, look up. There's opportunity. All of this has happened before. I say this a lot. All of this has happened before, and many, many people have come out better. The more conservative you are through these kind of times, keep cash. I don't mean under your mattress, just available, but in small chunks in several banks. So if the bank goes belly up, you're not affected. Keep cash, watch your spending, do what you have to, and do spend some time to have some fun throughout these times. And it'll feel kind of like you've earned that fun as the economy slows and as other impacts, recession, commercial real estate struggles, all of that starts to happen. But yeah, I mean, there is a way to both survive and even benefit in these times if you're really, really prudent and conservative with your capital.
Completely agree. What a great message.
I don't know why that hit me today.
Well,
I think, I do know why it hit me. It's because they were talking to Charlie Munger, who is Warren Buffett's business partner, and he said that commercial real estate is on the verge of collapse. So, I mean, he's a mean old geezer, but that doesn't make him wrong.
Right.
And he has seen it. He's 99 years old and still as lucid as has ever been. And if anyone went to the Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting, which many people who aren't shareholders go to, it's kind of the Super Bowl of finance. Can we say Super Bowl on here? Super Bowl?
You just did.
Right.
Genie's out of the bottle.
Right. He is a very both practical, knowledgeable, still lucid, and what do I want to say? Sage member of the finance community. So when he says it, there's good reason to put credence behind it.
Love it. What a great message to wrap on here today. And look here. Oh, Kim Winter is with us here. Great to see you, Kim. Always good, he says, to listen over dinner here in Dubai.
That's interesting how the time zones work, right? It's lunch here, it's dinner there. Yeah,
that is right. Kim's got a incredible travel and event schedule coming up. Great to see you, Kim.
Can I just ask a quick question? You can hit me offline, Kim, but between, say, the middle of June or middle of May and the middle of June, let me know if you're going to be on the European continent.
We get y'all hooked up, man. Wonder Twin Powers activate. Okay, folks, hopefully you've enjoyed this last hour as much as I have. Appreciate all the great comments, all the takes. We've made. I've been hungry since we were talking about barbecue on the very front end. So, Angela, I'm going to check out some of your expertise you dropped there. But, Greg, always a pleasure to knock out the buzz with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Folks, you can come join us on the buzz every Monday, 12 noon Eastern time. You can always check out the replay on Supply Chain Now, wherever you get your podcast from. So with all of that said, hey, take at least one of the many truckloads of rail car loads of nuggets that Greg dropped here today and put it into action, right? Deeds, not words, right? Take action. With that said, Scott Luton challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change. And we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.